So, without further ado, please welcome Ben Easter to the show. Welcome, Ben.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
You're so welcome. It's funny because, how often do you get introduced to someone and then find out that he lives where you grew up, lives 10 minutes from where I grew up in Washington State. But I want to tell you an interesting fact. So every month I get a download from Ginny Media saying, my analytics and who are the top 3 places that have been listening to your podcast. It was a few months ago, but it was Bonnie Lake.
Nice.
I mean, who's in Bonnie Lake? Isn't that funny?
I love that so much.
Yeah, that was one of the 3. And the last month was Seattle. So maybe all my high school friends or, you just never know who's listening when you have a podcast. You're like, please, I hope someone's listening. But when you get the analytics back and you're seeing that, you're like, oh, people do listen. I'm not just sitting here talking to myself.
That's nice.
Anyway, so welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And, Ginny introduced us and I see why now going down my Ben Easter little rabbit hole. But, I love, and if you've listened to my podcast in the past, I love, and why I call it Uncover Your Magic is I know everyone has magic and I love knowing when they really first realize it.
Yeah.
And, I love teaching kids that every single day there's magic, but you just got to look for it and keep your head up and, it's always there. But when I look at your childhood and I mean, there's so many benchmarks in your life that you took it and you're like, it's like a pivot and you're like, okay, I did this pivot. Then you're like, okay, I get to the next level and you're like, okay, that happened. I'm going to pivot again. But when I want you to explain just how you were as a kid, how you were raised, your religion, all that, and then go to high school. So there's certain things I want benchmarks. Okay.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You got it. So as a kid, I was raised by a single mother. My dad was not in the picture from the time I was like 2. And so I was raised by my mom and my grandmother and my aunts. They basically all kind of collaborated on my raising. My mom was a super intelligent woman. Really she was sharp, also very adept at understanding how people worked. And so she was really good at getting me to do whatever the thing was that she wanted me to do. And I remember, this is brilliant. I love this. We're going to do this with our kids. So there was a rule in my house. No, I didn't have to go to bed if I was reading. As long as I was reading, I could stay up as late as I wanted to, which is brilliant if you think about it, because you're gonna fall asleep while you're reading anyway, right?
So funny.
But she baked in this lifelong love of learning for me because of that. So that was just one of the things that she did. So we had that, raised with religion, kind of we would have called ourselves Christian, I guess. I really had a hard time with it once I started asking questions and I really couldn't get the answers back from any church that we were going to. Had a really hard time with that. By the time I was in high school, considered myself staunch atheist. And until I had this experience on drugs.
Right. That's what I can't wait for you to share that.
Yeah. And so anyway, and then from then on, I was just absolutely convinced. I had been looking at it wrong. And I think that's such a useful framework, is to just understand that the way that we see things really influences our opinions about them and our stories that go on in the world. That's one of the real, that's why we call our company Lucid Shift Coaching, is because it's about shining a light on something. Mm-hmm. And sometimes all it takes is shining a light on it, and then it'll change in and of itself. You just immediately have a different relationship to it. So that's something really big. Milestones. I don't know. When I was 8 years old, I was in my first play and I decided, I'm going to be an actor. Right. That is the end of my path. And then after I had this experience in high school, I was like, oh, I don't want to be fake anymore. I don't want to I'm not here to be dramatic. I'm here really to be aligned with what's real in the world, with who, what my authentic truth is,
Right.
And so I had that experience, had this massive head injury when I was 19, right after I had the awakening. And then I had this traumatic brain injury, which changed the trajectory of my life right after that, where I lost my social skill. I damaged the left temporal region of my brain, which amongst other things, it seems to have some kind of impact on my language acquisition and my ability to communicate clearly, my ability to understand what other people were saying and then like make sense of it. And so my social skills just really tanked right after that. So those were like big milestones.
Okay. So, but we need to dig a little deeper.
Great.
Because
so you tell me.
but I think when everyone can look back at their life, their childhood, their every little bench, section of their life, you can call it childhood, your junior high. I have a junior high kid and I have high school girl, 2 girls, and they're all in these little sections of their life that will make an impact. It'll, create a story. They'll, create limiting beliefs within these little sections. Right.
Totally. Yeah.
And, as a mom, I feel it's my job to point it out and get it clear now before we get to, they leave me and they're dealing with their, all these limits
stories
and their fear and all that. But when I hear you go through, you're an atheist and you're in high school and, you're not believing in anything higher than just this body that you're living in.
Yeah.
So you go with your friends. So we need to go deeper. I'm not like, let's go to go there.
Okay. So here was my reasoning. I was like, okay, well, God, all knowing, all powerful, all good. And, there's this philosophical problem, which is well known in the philosophy world, but I didn't know it in high school. I just was putting this together. I was like, well, if there's something that's all knowing, all powerful, and all good, like why is there evil in the world? Basically, it can't be true that there's such a thing, that these things exist. And then my friends and I, so it was such a beautiful experience. We went out to the beach. We had a friend who lived in the private section of the beach. So we parked there and we ate mushrooms and we're running out to the beach. My buddy Tommaso and I were like stripping off clothes, just like, we went into the water, we're naked, beautiful. And it was this really it was an unusual night at the beach because the ocean was incredibly still that night. And there was like this bioluminescence, glowing blue, like we were out there treading water, just like looking like water elementals, just glowing in the dark.
Where are you?
This
what
was
ocean?
in Sarasota, Florida. So we were in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was just it was a really just beautiful, super peaceful night, not a cloud in the sky, big full moon, just beautiful. And I was having all these questions. I mean, I had never had an experience like this, but I was asking all these questions, and something about the nature of the mushrooms was like, every time I would ask a question, I would get this beautiful kind of perfect answer back. And I was laying there in the water with my, my toes were just kind of gently dragging on the sand. Mm-hmm. And I was laying with just my face out of the water. My ears were below the surface, and I was kind of just like floating, hovering, really beautiful. And I again, all these beautiful questions coming through my head, and then these beautiful answers. And I had this moment where I like kind of twitched. I had just like a shiver or a random whatever. And my hand, it created a ripple in the water because the water was so still, and that ripple washed up over my face. And I was like, just in that moment, it was like a flash of lightning. I was like, everything I do impacts everything else in the universe and can't help but come back and impact me.
Right. Oh,
because we're all connected. Right. And that's what people are talking about when they're talking about God. That's the thing that's all knowing. Everything that's known is known by the universal oneness, right. All powerful, because all powers belong to the universal oneness, and all good. But what they don't tell you is it's also all evil, or really more accurately, there's no such thing as good or evil, because there's only one of us here. And we aren't doing good or evil to ourselves. It's a game that we're playing for eternity. And all of that just like hit me like a lightning bolt out of the blue. Totally changed my life. Like
that instant, you just knew.
I walked back out of that ocean a completely different person. Like I had such resistance to the word God. So like for a long time, I called it Zing. I spelled it like with a lowercase Z and an upside down exclamation point. Yeah. But yeah, just really changed my life, changed my relationship to reality. And it was like a huge, big deal. Never has left me ever since then.
That was high school.
yeah, I think it was like right before senior year. I think it was like right at the end of senior year of high school was when that happened.
And did all your friends get the same moment, aha moments?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Tommaso was always kind of that way, but then the other friends, they weren't with us there. And, um, yeah, I don't really think it was as impactful for them.
Okay.
But I remember being, like I was kind of a bully in high school. I didn't have like a North Star that kept me, I just wasn't very ethical. I was hanging out trying to be popular with these guys, and they were bullies. And so I was like a bully with them. Not really like proud of those days. And I remember like I was hanging out with them and these other two friends, Taylor and Jeremy. And I remember being in the room. The way the room worked was Gabe's bed was over here, and then there was like a love seat over on this side of me, and I was sitting in a chair in the middle. And as metaphors work, I was like right in the middle of this of these two. And so all these friends who were the bullies, they were funny, but all their joking, everything was always like at someone's expense. You know what I mean? It was always like joking about someone.
Right.
And then these two over here, to this day, Taylor's the funniest person I've ever met in my entire life. That's counting actors. Like he reminds me a lot of Zach Galifianakis. Actually, whenever I watch a Zach Galifianakis movie, I'm like, it so much reminds me of him. But he was just so hilarious. And these two, they were 10 times as funny as these guys. And the thing was, their jokes were never about anyone. It was always just some weird way of looking at the world. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And I just remember having this moment and looking back and forth between these two guys and being like, I don't want to be like them anymore. I don't want to play in that way. I want to play with these guys. And I mean, that was just like one of the instances of life-changing experiences that happened from this thing. But that was like one of my most powerful experiences.
So we go on, you're on this new trajectory. You've realized that it's a oneness. There's no separation. Mm-hmm. We all are from the same source, and we're all just in these little bodies doing our job, like doing what we signed up for. Yeah. Not really knowing, with a veil over our faces, like leading the blind, right?
Yeah, totally. The way I've conceived of it is like, it's almost like a hide and seek game. Like it's this perpetual cycle of forgetting and remembering. So like we remember, we have these moments of insights, and then we go and we forget, and we remember. And that's because I love the word remember. It means to like add back to the body. Like dismember is to take away from the body, and to remember is to add back to the body.
Right.
So like we have this moment of remembering, that's birth, where we actually member ourselves, and we have a body.
Right.
And then we go and we die. And that's the forgetting, the
dismembering.
Yeah. Part.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then like we just exist in the cycle of that tide. The ocean is like that, the coming in and then going out, the waves, each crest of the wave comes, and we can call it a wave and we can talk about it in one sense, but in another sense, it's just the ocean. It's not actually distinct from everything else. And I think that's a really good metaphor for what's happening with you and I. And so in this model, like I actually believe that you and I, there's only one of us here, and we're having a conversation with ourselves in order to remember, because the experience of remembering is really beautiful. We really like that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll forget and we forget. And that's beautiful too, because if we didn't forget, then we wouldn't get to have the experience of remembering. And we really like the experience of remembering,
Right. Oh yeah. I love that. Good. Yeah. You're so good at metaphors too, by the way. I've been listening to all your things, and it's like, oh, that's so Ben, just listening. But there's another benchmark coming up. So when you go to college, go to there, because this is a big one.
Yeah. So then I had this other, this was also on drugs, incidentally, although I was really ashamed of it for a long time. So I wouldn't tell people about that for a really long time, because it's just like, I didn't want to, I hate the reputation sometimes that drugs have. Because again,
but drugs meaning mushrooms. It's just
no. This time was acid. So and it was my first time with acid, and it was also the Taylor from the last story was in this story as well. So we went to college, and he wasn't going to the college, but he moved up there with Jeremy, who was going to the college. And so they were both there at this experience as well. And this one, I don't know, it's such a strange experience, because I wound up taking more than I would have if I had known, but everything happens exactly the way that it's supposed to happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
But anyway, so I wound up taking a lot, and then I was having this experience where everything was metaphors. You say like I'm good with metaphors, but I
Right.
really think in terms of metaphors. Like that's like how I process the world, and I really think in some ways that I'm living like I'm the main character of a book, and so all of the symbols and motifs that exist in my life, they're just like that's me playing out this narrative, you know?
Right.
And so I was looking around the world, and I was really paranoid because I was on probation. We skipped a step, but I was on probation at the time because I'd gotten into trouble at the end of high school. And then I was really paranoid. So I was having this experience where I kept like seeing like police lights flashing behind me, and for me, this whole experience was really about these two forces that I was talking about. There's like the attention force and the distraction force, or the remembering and the forgetting. That
Right.
idea of there's like a single pointed focus, and then there's the thing that its only job is to try to take us away. So again, like we've got this eternal being, God, whatever you want to call it, this oneness, and it's playing a game with itself forever, right? To take up eternity, essentially.
Right.
And so the point of the game is that we have one force that like draws things together, and one force that just like takes things apart. And there's neither good or bad, right? They've been called those things in the past, but it's just like to prolong the game. And so I'm like, here I am, like trying to work on the side of the attention force, and I just keep being distracted, and these lights are flashing, and I keep being distracted, and I was seeing symbols and everything. And so I was like, well, what am I? Like, I'm afraid right now. I'm afraid. So I just like need to face my fear and get over it. Like, I just need to get over my fear. And so I was like, well, what am I afraid of? Well, I guess I'm afraid that I'm going to go to jail or something, that I'm going to throw my life down the drain,
Oh my
you know?
gosh.
And then I was like, okay, fine. I'll face that fear. I'll throw my life down the drain, because everything was in symbols. I went into the bathroom and I like tried to get down the bathroom drain. Did not work. Was not able to do that.
Couldn't fit.
Yeah, I couldn't fit. It didn't work. So anyway, I was like getting heated. I was really passionate. All these things were happening. And so like I go to the front door. We're on the second story of this apartment complex, and I throw open the front door, and I was like, fuck this, I'm going to jail. And I, my buddy Taylor, he was like, hey man. And I was like, what? And he's like, just don't kill yourself. And I was like, that's the fear at the bottom of every other fear, is death. Like that's the real ultimate fear of what's happening. And I was like, fuck that, I'm doing it. And I turned, and
oh my gosh.
Ironically, I was wearing my Superman shirt.
Oh, God.
At the time.
Oh my gosh.
And I jumped off this second story balcony.
Are you still there? Can you still put yourself in that body? Like your mind,
yes.
where you said, I'm going to go do this, even though you were on an acid trip?
I can get to it now. For like 6 months afterwards, I was not able to access like any of this really. This wasn't like part of my reality, but then the memories started to come back later. At this point, I have this one memory of just going for it. Like I was head down, just like going for the ground.
Oh my gosh.
Superman style. Yeah. So I got off really easy because I woke up in the hospital. Well, I don't even know. It would have been so horrible of it. Well, whatever. Experiences are experiences. We're here for whatever.
Yeah. No bad or good.
Yeah.
All
right.
good.
Exactly. So
they're all perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, I wake up in the hospital. My mom, who lived like 5 hours away at the time, was there at the bedside table when I woke up.
Oh, wow.
So I was in a coma for a little while. And then the doctors were telling me, that I probably wouldn't walk again for months, and that I would never be myself again, because I'd had a massive brain injury. And I was like, wait, I was a 19-year-old boy. And like, you don't tell me, because I had been studying Deepak Chopra for a long time. And I was like,
oh, really? Oh, yeah, cool.
I was really into like healing the body. I had a golf teacher. There's all these little vignettes, but I had a golf teacher who I was on scholarship. We didn't have the money for a golf teacher, but out living in Sarasota, Florida, golf was just like, I loved it so much. So I was on the golf team in high school. And then I had this golf teacher who scholarshiped me. But one of the conditions of the scholarship was that I had to listen to Deepak Chopra every night as I was falling asleep.
Oh my gosh.
And then when I would come to the lessons, he would be like, all right, so what have you learned from the good Dr. Deepak this week? And I had to like recap basically.
That's amazing. What an amazing experience. Brilliant. Wow.
Andre Panay Raymond. He was such a great dude. But anyway, so the doctor told me all that, and I was like, there's no way you don't know me. I'll show you. And so like I went to work on it, and I was like up and about in 6 weeks. And, after about 2 months, I considered myself to have made a full recovery. I wasn't like, I was still getting headaches sometimes, but I was like able to, do all the normal things, and I was ready to go back to school.
But you know what's cool before you go is
Yeah.
that golf teacher, you guys had this soul contract that you're like, okay, you're going to come into my life at 19. Yeah. You're going to put Deepak in my head.
Totally.
So then when I have this accident, I'm going to realize that all healing is coming from from my mind.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it was great.
I love looking at breadcrumbs.
I know there are so many breadcrumbs. It's like so funny because it's hard to, in hindsight, you can kind of like organize them and put them into place. But at the time, you never know what's happening. No. That's why I'm like, who knows? Good, bad, like who knows? There's,
it's all good. It's all good.
Exactly. Yeah. Or it's all bad, and you can have whatever perspective you want. That's the whole point. Like you get to do it however you want to. So anyway, I'm like up and about, and then I was at dinner. This was like maybe 6 months after the accident. My grandma's like, kind of like how you've been since the accident. And I was like, what do you mean how I've been since the accident? I made a full recovery. And she was like, no, you stutter and you have a hard time understanding what other people are saying. And you have these long pauses in your conversation. You don't know this. And it was like, I got hit by a bus because I had no idea that these things were happening. I really thought I had made a full recovery. And then I have this woman who I trust, my whole life. And she's telling me that I'm not, I've radically changed. And I got super depressed. I got anxious because now I'm like, it's like that feeling of having spinach in your teeth, and you find out that you have spinach in your teeth. And you're like, oh my God, how long do I have spinach in my teeth,
right?
But it's like,
so funny.
I can't even see it in a mirror. There was no way for me to know that these things were happening, because it was literally the thing that you would use to evaluate whether or not you were having errors is the thing that's having an error.
Right.
My brain. And so anyway, I got like really depressed for a long time because I was kind of hopeless. And because I thought I was broken, my brain was broken. I really thought I had made a full recovery, but since I didn't know that I hadn't, then I basically just got really depressed and isolated. It was interesting because only that part of my brain was damaged. So my grades were still really good. I took up Kung Fu at this time. I'd been a dancer in high school, and then I just like didn't have any athletics in my life. So I took up Kung Fu, got really dedicated to it. I was progressing really rapidly in Kung Fu, loving that. But then I just like didn't have a social life at all. And socializing had always been very important to me. So I was like really depressed about it all. And I contemplated suicide at that time because I really didn't see there being a way out. And then had a friend come into my life. He recommended this book to me, The Game: Penetrating the Secret Society of Pickup Artists. And I was like, no, I'm not going to read that. He's like, dude, you should read it. And I was like, no, I'd rather die alone than manipulate women into sleeping with me. I'm not interested in it. Thank you very much. And he was like, it's not like that. And I was like, well, then they should name it differently. Anyway, this went on for like 6 months. We were roommates. And finally, one day I was going camping and I was looking for a book to bring with me camping. And he was like, dude, listen, I know you don't want to read this book, but what if you read it just so that you could argue with me about it? And I was like, oh, I see what you did there. All right. And so I read the book. It wasn't what it sounds like. It really was about this guy who he'd not had any success in romance. He had a really solid career. He was a writer for the Rolling Stones magazine. He was a successful dude, but he just like couldn't figure out romance in his life. And so he went on a journey to solve the problem. But what my big takeaway from the book was that social skills are just that. They're skills, and you can develop skills. Even if you've lost skills, you can redevelop skills. And so I was like, well, I was going to kill myself anyway. I might as well give it my all. You know what I mean? And so I just I set out with a will to learn these skills. And so I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I was attending seminars. And I was I had this one series that I listened to probably, 24 times, called the Mastery Series by David D'Angelo. Beautiful, very awesome experience thing. That
not just relationships, but just seminars, like personal development.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing. There's a light side of the force and a dark side of the force here. Okay. So the dark side of the force is like actually the thing that I thought the book was about originally, which is like manipulating people into doing things, really gross stuff. Okay. And that exists, and it exists in the
Right.
sales world too, right? There are like sales tactics because we're talking about the same thing, right? There are like sales
Right.
tactics that are like really hard sales tactics where you like pressure people into things. And then there are sales tactics that are really about just really providing a service to the world,
Hmm.
and then helping people to see that that what they want is connected to the service that you have in the world, right? So
Right.
light side and dark side, same thing. There's a dark side that is like manipulating people. There's a light side that is just like, well, if you want to be attractive to the opposite sex, hey, guess what? Be the best version of yourself. Like become, like set out, to be the highest and best version that you can possibly be, because then you're naturally going to be more attractive to other people.
Got
You'll
it.
naturally work on your communication skills so that you can communicate with people, work on your social dynamics so that you understand like where like tensions arise and that you can resolve those tensions, because then you will be a partner worthy of having. You'll become the kind of person that people would want to be naturally be attracted to. So that was what I was doing. I was like following that. That's so when you say personal development, it's like, yeah, I was like busy becoming the best version of myself.
Like on a mission. You just were like, I need to
Yeah.
figure this out.
Yeah, totally. And I had this crippling social anxiety. So that was like one of the obstacles that I was like, I've got to figure this out. Somehow I have to figure this social anxiety thing out, because I'll never be able to talk to people if I can't go talk to people. So I remember like standing at the bottom of the down escalator.
Yeah, I love this story.
Yeah. And I was like, I literally asked every single woman out for coffee. I was trying to get to 100 no's. That was the objective, was not to get a coffee date, but it was to get to 100 no's so that I could like prove to myself that I would be okay if I got 100 no's. And it was like a miserable experience for like the first 15, 20. Then it started to like not be so miserable. And then actually by like 60, 70, it actually started to be kind of fun. Like it was like, you want to get a coffee? No. How about you? You want to go get like two women side by side?
So you like using a clicker? Like there's one, there's
Yeah.
two.
I was just counting them on my, I have beads. I've always been really into these.
Oh yeah.
Because I was also, Deepak also really got me into like spiritual practices and things like that. And so
Uh-huh.
when I was in college, I found the Hare Krishnas. And I loved it. They like fed people. The Hare Krishna's whole model for religion is to like basically give people food for free and then have conversations with them about God and then have a dance party to God. And like that is, to me, is awesome. So I would count things on these beads. I would count mantras and affirmations, or anything that I want to do reps on. I'm going to use beads for.
So you're holding the beads at the bottom of the escalator
In my pocket,
okay.
like going through. Yeah.
You're not like, what? Oh my gosh,
No.
you're so
Yeah.
cute. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so that really helped because at the end of
And
that
no one
experience-
said yes.
Well, one person gave me a fake number.
Oh, funny.
Nobody said yes, but it's okay. That wasn't the point. It was not to get yeses. It was to develop the skill, that resilience. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And now I could do it, and I would be able to get yeses for sure. But
You would?
oh
Why?
yeah, oh totally. Well, because now I really understand social dynamics really well. I know how to talk to strangers. Like because that's what I spent a decade of my life just with it on the front burner, was like, how do you talk to strangers and get them interested in you right away, and then build the foundation for developing a relationship with somebody. And so I can do
Mhm.
that. Like my wife, she teases me. My tongue-in-cheek title in our company is called the Chief Schmoozing Officer, because I will go to a party or whatever, and I just like, I'll go around and I'll talk to everybody. I'll make friends with like the whole party. Everybody
Right.
is there, right?
But it's authentic. That's what I love about
Oh
you.
yeah.
Because
Oh,
it's not,
totally.
it's totally authentic. And, even having a podcast, I've had people, it's like watching me grow and kind of get confidence, and get
Yeah.
past those 100 episodes of the
Exactly.
escalator people.
Yeah.
But, it's like, oh, when you get to be that, when I get someone on before I push record, for an example,
Yeah.
they look at, I can see a wall first, sometimes I'm just,
Yeah.
they don't know you. It's a brand new experience. We're going to have an hour conversation. Who's this lady? What is she going to ask me? And I think the most fun about my podcast is before I hit record, because I'm like, this is just going to be fun. I'm here like it's real. I don't care what we talk about. I don't have questions, but then I can see this whole shift in energy,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love doing that. That's why I love this podcast, because I love to like get down to the person who really is there and like bring that person out.
Totally.
And you do
Yeah.
that so good. Okay,
Yeah.
continue.
Thanks. Well, I think that's like I think that's what we're here for. So like, my podcast is called the Shift to Freedom podcast, but that when I say freedom, what I mean is like the freedom to be you. Like
Mhm.
whatever that looks like in the world, like to be radically, authentically yourself in every situation all the time. Because that's what I think we really want. That's like when people talk about financial freedom, that's all they really are talking about, is like, I want to be able to live the life that
Right.
is like exactly the life that I want to live. When people are talking about like time freedom, it's the same thing. Like I want to wake up and spend my days like doing the things that I most want to do in the world. Right. And so I think
What
that's
is
like that.
time? What is
That's the
time to
journey.
you? I'm going to take this down
Time.
a different, yeah. What's your
Yeah.
definition of time?
Well, time, it's so interesting because time is something that's really confusing because, I really believe in eternity. So in one sense, just like remember we were talking about the ocean, the waves, that in
Mhm.
one sense, you can talk about like that is a wave. I see it, it's a wave. And in the other sense, it's like, well, yeah, but where do you really draw the line between that wave and the wave right before it? And like, is there really a distinction? And so that's kind of the thing, is like, there's time. And yeah, and in one sense, like I have this wave that I am, that it has arisen and it will fade away. And so in a sense, there's like a timeline for this entity, which is just again an arbitrary
Right.
demarcation of existence. And so in the sense there's a timeline, but in another sense, time is more like a circle. At
Yeah.
least that's the way that I can conceive of it, is it being a perpetual like circle, a ring. That's like the clue that's in the chicken or the egg thing, is like there's no beginning or ending. That's
Right.
the whole thing.
Mhm. But can
So,
at a couple of years ago, before I started this podcast, I've always been a seeker like you.
yeah.
I've read everything, up until the podcast came out, then I'd start, going down that hole. And, now I'm so grateful that I have this. But, when you realize like time, you go from like you wake up and you go do here, you're in this human body, and, you have the
Yeah.
clock and everything's by the
Yeah.
time. And then you start to evolve and you're learning, and you're like, it's a sphere. It's like everything's happening right now. Everything,
Exactly.
my
There's only
past,
one moment.
my future, and the present moment. Everything is
Yeah.
right now. So to wrap
Yeah.
my head around that, it's getting better.
Yeah. Nice.
But it's like, that's why I always love to ask that question, because I love listening, because maybe I'll learn something from you that'll help me learn it better or
Totally.
understand it better.
Well, I don't know if you ever read, I think, gosh, I hope that I'm getting the name of the book right. It's Slaughterhouse-Five. I think I'm associating the right book, but there's this alien race in Slaughterhouse-Five called the Tralfamadorians, and they see in 4 dimensions. So like we see in 3 dimensions, but they also see time. And so they like, Kurt Vonnegut tries to explain how
Oh,
they see things in this 4 dimension, almost like there's like these worms that exist. Like, like if you could see me, because, physicists call it space time, right?
mm-hmm.
And so it's because all time really is like a measurement of movement of space, of
Right.
objects in space, right? And like some way of relating things to each other. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you could see in 4th dimensions, like imagining your entire, timeline as a series of like snippets, I guess, like it's such an interesting, or almost like as a worm, because there wouldn't be like segments the way that I can even conceive of it.
Right,
Anyway,
right, right.
it's just the
But have you done past life regressions before?
no, I've never had that experience. I just met this hypnotherapist because I've hypnotized myself from the good Dr. Deepak. He has like lessons for that, but I've
Uh-huh.
never actually been hypnotized, and I'd really like
Huh.
to have that experience.
I did a past life. I've done a couple, and it makes, at first you realize, is this really true, or am I making it up in my head?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you realize, and then I do it again. I go, wow, it is, I get it. It's so cool that's where I'm understanding the concept of time more when I do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just so, when you think of the future, I had somebody that could teleport, and they came back with sand in their toes and a wet bathing suit, and they went to Jamaica.
Nice.
on the couch. I'm like, what? So it's there, it's almost like, these people that I'm interviewing that are channels, or, that have figured out how to get to that vibration to connect.
Yeah.
It's like connecting to that. And, I feel like our, where we're at in our life right now is we're ascending to that fourth, like it's like this shift is huge. I mean, don't you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah. Well, I sure hope that we make it. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't really have a story about it one way or the other, but yeah, the ever present nature of it, I think, is something that's a really interesting, like that these like quote unquote timelines, that they're really just alternate space lines,
Mhm.
There's a really cool short video called The Egg. Have you ever seen it? By
Uh-uh.
a YouTube producer. I think it's pronounced Kurzgesagt, but really cool little vignette. But it just talks about kind of what if all of existence were an egg. We're inside an egg waiting to hatch.
Okay.
And each life, all of the lives, by the way, are the one entity that's inside the egg, having all of the experiences to be ready to crack out of the egg.
Right.
And I think it's like
How do
really
you
beautiful.
look at, like, if you were going to say to me, like, Ashley, this is how I view life. Like, I come here in this body. Where was I before? Where am I going next? How do you describe that?
Yeah. So for me, it would be like, so all of those like lives, quote unquote, I again, for me, there's only one of us here. And so it's not like I have all of these lives, right? For me, it's like literally all of the lives there's only one being in existence looking out.
Right.
And whether that be me or you or this table or this phone, there's only like the sum total of all matter and energy in the world. And even that's just two ways of looking at the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The field and the players, and so for me, the way that I think of reality and existence is just, it's this game that we play, and we put obstacles in our way so that the game takes as long as it possibly can. And
Do you feel like before you came into this body, made the plan, like figured out, like, well, I'm going to pick that for my mom, and we all decided this, I'm going to pick Paige for my wife. Was she your husband and a brother in another life? I mean, do you go that way?
Yeah, maybe. I sometimes wonder, but I don't, but again, like, I don't really, I think of it more like a dream where you can create anything that you want to in your dream. So rather than like, I don't necessarily think of it as like some predetermined thing that, like, I came into this body ready to have these experiences in a life, but more like what experiences am I most wanting to experience based on the flavors of this, like when I say flavors, I mean like, everybody kind of has their own tastes that they like, right?
Uh-huh.
And I use that as a metaphor, but yeah, our personality, totally. So it's like, beer, for instance, I didn't start liking beer. I like beer now, but it was only through like a cultivated effort of experience of beer. But even the journey to liking beer came because like I had something that I wanted to experience in the world. I wanted to be a beer liker for some reason so that I would show up that way. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so for me, it's like what it means to be this entity versus like your entity is like, just like everybody has their own flavor profiles that they like,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody also has their own experience profiles that they like, and based on like the matter that we have like the flavor profiles that we want. And so we're on a journey to like experience as many of those particular kinds of enjoyable things. Like my wife loves putting together puzzles. For me, my eyes start bleeding. I'm like, I don't even, why would I do that? You know what I mean? It's not in the puzzle whether or not there's enjoyment, right? Because for some people it is, and for some people it's not, right? And so I think of the journey as being like a creation from our essence in this like configuration, right? Like
Mhm.
what it means to be me is to be shaped like this. And that means also that I have like certain experiences that I'll want and certain experiences that I won't want. And that being an authentic being, playing the authentic game, is to have more of those experiences that I want, because that's just what it means to be me, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. When
Yeah.
you so right now, Ben Easter, he used to be a relationship. You've had 8 businesses up
I
until
hate
this point.
businesses. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the thing that, if people knew that you didn't have to sit at a job for 40 years and collect retirement and then think, okay, now I'm retired and then in a few years I'm going to die. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but I love it. What you do is you add, you know, if this isn't gonna, this not filling me up right now, I feel like something else is coming. I love something. So I have a new interest. I'm going to go there and see where I can find joy. It's
Yeah.
always, I always talk about just find joy, be happy. When you find that, that's when you are living your passion or your dream. But that's what you remind me of that. Like just doing it. Like you could have another 20 businesses before you die. Like I can just see it keep
Totally.
evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because and then because fear, doubt, and uncertainty gets in the way of so many of those like desires. I hear a lot of people say in the coaching world, like, I just don't know what I want. I don't not buy that. I just don't buy it. I think we all know what we want, but it's scary sometimes to acknowledge that we know what we want, because, well, if we acknowledge it, then, well, we know that there's a path to walk,
Right.
and
And I
that
better
might be
move.
full of, and that might be full of scary things. So sometimes it's easier to just say like, I don't know, than to like acknowledge to ourselves that we do. And so, like that, because going back to that acid experience, there was this like, there's something to that idea of me like facing the ultimate fear of death. I think there really is something to be said for that, and being willing to like face fears, knowing that the worst case scenario is just that you die, and hey, guess what, you were already gonna die. It was
Right.
already going to happen. We're guaranteed the quote unquote worst case scenario. So we might as well play. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly.
That's what, and you can hear that too in the part of the story where I was like going to kill myself. Right. And I was like, well, this was the thinking that I was having in my head. I was like, well, if I'm going to kill myself anyway, I might as well go out and try my damnedest first before I kill myself. Right. That's it. Like, how we all of us know that we're not going to, no one gets out alive, right? But
Right.
what do we do with the game in the meantime? You know what I mean?
Right.
What do we do when we play full out? You
Right.
know?
That's why you're so successful at what you do, is because of all the, I mean, like we said, when you met the golf teacher, with the Deepak, you can have look at the higher perspective of your life, from like a drone, and you're looking at, because it's all happening now.
Yeah, totally.
So, there's no past or present, or no past or future. So when you're looking at Ben Easter experience life right now in this at this moment, you can put the puzzle pieces together for Paige, and
Yeah.
so she could understand it and
Totally.
understand why all these things happen to get you to where you are now. Because I just know that life, when we get to this age, it's all about giving our knowledge of what we've learned in the past. All I care about is being a mom and teaching my kids, and now teaching my through my classes. Is I don't, it's not even about the money. Like I just want it that I
Totally.
have such a drive, but that's what
Yeah.
you do because you've had those experiences that you can teach. And if you hadn't done that, like, what are you just going to sit here and like, oh, I wanted to die one day. And that's the part, but you put flame under people, and you explain it because you have a story. And so you can relate, and they can relate to you.
Mm-hmm.
So who's coming to Ben to get coached? What are these people? Are they trying to start businesses, or what? Find a new career?
Usually they have businesses. In the vast majority of cases, I'm going to say at this point, they all have businesses already. And they're usually early stage, not always, but typically service-based. I'd say like 80-20 service-based businesses. And they're usually dealing with some of the following kind of challenges. Like people talk about perfectionism or like imposter syndrome or fear of failure or fear of rejection, overwhelm, like people pleasing and like difficulty setting boundaries, like these things that they show up again and again and again and again in people's realities. And so one way of looking at what I do is I help people believe in themselves, like in their ability to overcome literally any challenge, any obstacle that is possibly in their way. Like I believe first, I believe in them as powerfully as because I can see it. I don't doubt it. There's no doubt in my mind
Right.
that if you like, there's no magic, there's no mystery. Like, you know, I mean, yeah, there's magic because it's all magical, but not like, it's not like magical in some sense that you like need to find some spell. And if you get the spell right, you know, you can do it. And if you don't, you can't, you know what I mean? It's like, it's more like, when I look at Mount Rainier out my window, and it's more like, if I want to get to Mount Rainier, all I got to do is look in the direction and start moving my feet. And if I'm willing to navigate every obstacle that gets in the way between here and there, I'll get there. Right. And sometimes I might have to go backwards a little bit to build a bridge or build a boat or something to get across the river. But if I'm willing to do that and then go back and keep like, this is like, I talk about radical commitment, but the idea behind this is that commitment isn't about staying on the course. Commitment is about agreeing to return to the course over and over and over again. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's great.
And and I just think that that's like a really, it's not magic, but it's kind of like magic. If you do this in any direction, you'll get there. There's no like, you know, and people are like, well, there are things that are impossible. And it's like, well, are there though? Like, how do you know what things are impossible? You won't know until in hindsight. So
but how do you get those people? Because when I get these people and they're like, you know, all the self-doubt or unworthiness, I'm not enough, the sabotage, all that, and these limiting beliefs. And I love working with limiting beliefs. I love proving them wrong and, you know, but they're so ingrained in their mind. And when they are going down this path that you're talking about to get to Mount Rainier, and they're walking and they have all these fear-based thoughts, and, you know, that have played in their life, their whole life, they just, that's all they know, this loop that keeps playing and will make them turn around or take the Y in the road. And, you know, maybe one day figure out they can come back, but because I think you love helping people with their limiting beliefs.
Yeah, totally.
What do you do with that?
Well, I mean, so we have conversations and I like play. I'm like, I use a lot of metaphor, like I just did with the Mount Rainier thing, right? Like I use a lot of metaphor because I think metaphor helps to suspend disbelief. Because when we're hearing about a story or about, you know, a tree and the way that the tree grows and we're describing it, like we're not doubting anything about it. We're just looking at things a different way. And so a lot of times I have conversations with people and I get curious. And sometimes, like, honestly, the thing about fear is a lot of times it's like the boogeyman. It hangs out in the dark and in the closet, and it only works because it's like hidden from our view, you know, like we're unwilling to look over there. And so sometimes if we just like shine a flashlight over there and we're like, hey, it's like, really though, what are you worried about? Like, what's the worst that could happen here? Right. And they're like, well, something bad. And it's like, cool. And then what? And sometimes most people, like, they haven't actually asked themselves like that and then what question, because, and I call this the Disney effect, because we have, you know, Disney always has like the happily ever after at the end of the end of the movie, which is total bullshit, by the way. Anybody who's ever been in a relationship that's lasted for any amount of time knows that there's no happily ever after, right? There's like, you go home and then you fight and then you make up and you have sex and you like eat dinner together and you have conversations and then you fight again and you like, you know, whatever. It's like, that's the nature of reality, is that we have ups and downs, right? It's not, there's no ever after of anything. But the game that people play, this fear game that we play, is like this, like awfully ever after, I call it. Like, well, that would happen and then it'd be awful ever after. And it's like, well, no, that's not how anything works. Change is inevitable and it's an inherent part of reality. There is no ever after. So if we play the game and we actually look at like, what's the worst that could happen, a lot of times the fears will melt away just from taking a flashlight to them. You know what I mean? And then other times they're like a little bit deeper rooted. And sometimes we have like a problem believing in ourselves, and it can show up in so many different ways. Like perfectionism is actually like rooted in some kind of insecurity or like feelings of unworthiness, right? And so sometimes we have to explore what that unworthiness, like what is their personal recipe for worthiness, and see if we can fit themselves into that recipe for worthiness, right? Because we have all these like concepts, and we put together the world. I think of it like a basket. Like we're all gathering all of our words together as we're born. You're given a basket, and then like as you're picking up concepts in the world, you're like, oh, well, that's an apple. Like, oh, that's what love means. Like, oh, that, like, and it'll evolve over time. But sometimes when you're 7, you're not the best judge of anything really, because you don't have a context. You're developing your context. You know what I mean? And so sometimes like just creating a new context and thinking about things in a different way and updating the operating system. Because, like for a 7-year-old, don't talk to strangers. Look, I'm not going to say it's good advice, but it's not bad advice. In other words, the risks of talking to strangers might outweigh the benefits that you could get. And it's complicated to know the difference of when it would be beneficial and when it wouldn't. So maybe it's useful to tell a 7-year-old not to talk to strangers. Maybe. Okay. But for a 37-year-old business owner, that is really bad advice. Like, don't talk to strangers is horrible advice for me, because if I don't talk to strangers, I don't get to do any of these things that I love, that they're like gated behind talking to strangers.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I don't change my relationship to the concept that I was taught, stranger danger, when I was 7, if I don't change my relationship to that as an adult, well, there's a whole lot of possibilities that are cut off for me, because I don't have access to the things that are behind talking to strangers, So sometimes it's just about like looking at our beliefs and really like understanding what is going on in there, not like necessarily where they came from. I'm not so interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in like, what would you have to believe in order to take these actions over here?
Like who would that person become? I always
love that.
Talk about that. I just love, it's like, if you want, I always talk about, just as a mom with my daughters, like they want something, go become it now. Be that person. What would that person talk like? What would that person eat? What would that person, who would that person's friends be?
Exactly. Ask me all those questions, any question you can think of about that person, and then answer them and imagine that. Right.
And I love we get to the hour already and I can't believe it. I'm like, shoot. But when you talk about visualization, because I'm very much like that, but you talk about, you said a cool way, because I'm about the reticular activating system too.
Oh yeah.
We play those games in the car all the time. We play just to show them like it's all there, whatever you want, pick it out. They're going to have 10 of them right in a row.
Yeah, exactly.
But talk about your explanation of how important visualization is, and then attach it to the reticular activating system. And then we'll kind of close out.
Cool. Yeah. Well, so I think visualization is probably one of the most important things, because like going back to the commitment, like in order to get to commitment, we have to believe that it's possible for us. And so finding some way to believe that it's possible, not just like in some esoteric way, like, oh yeah, everything's possible, but like believing that it's possible for you to do. Like there's some series of steps that you could take, and just literally just imagining that, asking yourself the question, well, cool. I love that question. What kind of person would I be if I were already there? If I were already able to do this thing in the world, what would I be like? And getting really clear on that. And then it's like, cool. Well, if you need to be stronger, well, there's a path to get stronger. If you need to be stronger in whatever these skills are, great. There's a path to walk all of those. And so like really finding that path and seeing yourself walking the path is so freaking important. And like not to be overstated. So like I use the beads a lot, and I call them affirmations. But I use affirmations with clients in a very particular way. Like you pick an affirmation, no more than 3, and then you work them one beat at a time. And you're saying the words, but what you're really doing is you're visualizing yourself as the person who has those qualities, right? I'm a powerful and effective coach. My calendar's filling up with paying clients. Cool. All right. Well, that's words. But now what does it mean for me to actually see that in my reality? I'm a powerful and effective coach, and my calendar's filling up with paying clients. Well, I'd be getting feedback from my clients telling me like how grateful they are, right? Like I'd be noticing that they'd be telling me, cool, I'm a powerful and effective coach. Oh, I'd be having these like moments where clients are having serious insights in calls. Like I'd be seeing that for sure. I'm a powerful and effective coach. My calendar's filling up with paying clients. Well, oh, I noticed my calendar just being full. Like I'd be trying to find spots, right? And so like I'm playing this game with myself where I'm like imagining the world as it is in that alternate reality where it's already done that way. Right. And as I'm doing that, now we're activating the reticular activating system. This is where, because the reticular activating system is the part of our brain that makes meaning from data. There's too much data. I mean, this is a long explanation, but I'm going to try to make it really short. There's too much data for us to process in the world around us. We like literally can't process it all. There's so much data that our brain has to take shortcuts to even, like, we call it a tree. But have you looked at a tree recently and actually like how many data points there are? You can't even conceive of how many data points there are in just a simple object like a tree, right? So we slap a word on there and now we've like made a shortcut for our brain, and it's easy, but it cuts off a whole lot of possibility out there in the world, right? So what the reticular activating system is it's bringing to our conscious awareness through this. It's like a subconscious filter that brings to our conscious awareness what's important. What we've said is important to our subconscious mind. And what we've said is important is the things that we've spent our time paying attention to, the things that we've brought to our conscious awareness again and again, the questions that we have that are unanswered, the things that we've imagined in our mind, and all those things. The reticular activating system is saying, cool, that's important to me. Let's pay attention to what those things are. And now our reality literally becomes filled with those things. In fact, your reality, you're already doing this right now. And the listener, you're doing this as we speak. Everything that you're aware of in your reality is only there because you've already primed your reticular activating system to notice the things that are relevant to you. And if you look around your environment, you start just naming things that are in your environment, I promise you, all of those things you've primed yourself to make important to you because you won't even be aware. It'll literally be like a blind spot in your reality that you wouldn't even notice it until like, for instance, your left heel. Nobody was thinking about that probably until I just said it. And now it's in your awareness, your left heel. Right. Because I just primed your reticular activating system and now it became a part of your reality, even though it already like was. Anyway, I got to go off on that tangent for a really long time.
No, I know. I get into that too, because I'm such a visual person. I know the power in that. And when you have that, I see your excitement and your like passion in the teaching people how it's limitless. There's no limits in life, and you can do anything, and you can be anything, and you can have anything. These limits that we put upon ourselves are just these roadblocks that we're creating on our own, in our own reality. No one else is doing it but ourselves.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, it's like, and that's where I think what I love about, for me, working with the kids the teenagers, to get that now in your mind, to know these tools at that age, instead of, waiting till you wake up at 50 or maybe never wake up.
Totally. Yeah.
But gosh, I get so, and I see your passion too. So I really like, you're a mirror of me for sure.
Totally. Totally.
Anyway, so coming to the end, we can find you on your website, your podcast. Give us all the info on what you're doing now and what's coming up.
Yeah. So lucidshiftcoaching.com would be like where you could find any of us. And then the podcast is really the thing where we're really excited about. This is a relatively new project. We're like 4 episodes in at this point. The Shift to Freedom podcast. We're everywhere that you would want to listen to podcasts. Really excited having conversations about this, like the freedom conversations. Like, what does it mean to wake up to yourself, to be your most authentic self? And so we have a few different segments where, my wife and we discuss Disney movies and all the metaphors that you can learn.
I listened to that. That was good.
Yeah. In the Disney movies. And my buddy Clayton and I talk about like, he's a relationship coach and like a being coach. And so we talk about like relationship and being, and what does it mean to like, because I do business and he does relationships, and we have the conversations about how that shows up in both. And then Sophie is just she's so practical. She's in it day in, day out in the entrepreneurial journey. And so she's very practical. She's so good at asking the questions that like get you to what are the action steps? You know what I mean? So we have really, really good conversations there. And then I'll do solo episodes too, where I'm just exploring these concepts in a way where I can get like kind of organize the ideas and we can talk about like visualization, things like that. So that would be where I would encourage everybody else to catch up with us. The coaching business is full right now, but the podcast is designed to help people.
Coaching business is full. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really nice to be in that place.
Oh, I bet. Oh,
That visual, that affirmation, I'm a powerful and effective coach. My calendar is filling up with paying clients. I ran that for 10,000 beads until I was seeing the results of it in my actual reality. Affirmations are one of those things that I think people hear it and it sounds silly or it sounds like magical or whatever, but it's like one of those things that if you put the time into doing your reps in those things and doing your visualization with it, holy shit, it is like a game changer. When I was doing my learning back in the day and I had the social skills, I was running, I'm calm, confident, funny, relaxed, energetic, entertaining, interesting, and able. I'm calm, confident, funny, relaxed, energetic, entertaining, interesting, and able. Just over and over and over again. I would do it as I would like get myself ready to go to a bar and like talk to strangers,
oh my gosh.
And at the time I felt like I was none of those things.
Huh.
And now I genuinely and authentically feel like those are such integrated parts of my reality that there's no separation, so
no, I'm all about affirmations
run them. Yeah.
in that way where you really are creating it, understanding that you are creating it. You're just not going through the motions, I guess, is, you have
it's
intention.
not just like saying things or like these big lists of affirmations. That's why that's not as useful, is because you're not actually practicing them when you're doing that. You're just like running through them. Like, saying it once. I mean, think about how many times you said all the nasty things that you say in your brain about yourself, right? Like how many reps of those you've done, right? So we're going to have to shift the pendulum to the other side.
Totally. I mean? Yeah. I mean, I work with like people in their 40s that have this constant negative loop. And it's a really hard, it's a habit and it's only a habit, but geez, to think of like, how do I do this? And I'm like, it's so simple. Change that one word.
Yeah, literally. And just repeat it as many times as you can remember to repeat it. Like, what if it's a game of like, how many times a day can I be saying this affirmation rather than like, well, I'll do 100 every day. And it's like, well, yeah, that's cool. And that'll be great. Right. But what if you're just like, how often can I remember to think this thought about myself? Right. How often can I remember to put myself in that future or that alternate reality where it's already happening that way? You know what I mean? Focus on qualities because, outcomes are harder. I have $1 million in the bank. That's not, first of all, money isn't as motivating, but second of all, it'll be harder for us to get over that like belief loop. But if you say like, I'm the kind of person who can make $1 million, that's a different place to come from. You could imagine what that person looks like without having $1 million in the bank already. Right. So, focus on qualities, things like that, but gosh, so valuable.
I know. See, we could talk forever, Ben. No kidding. I love it. Okay. So I was asked this question on a podcast from this amazing man that's for my friend, Dominic Zenden. He reads auras and he asked me, he likes to throw curveballs. And so I'm going to, in honor of him, I'm going to throw you a curveball. What was the last piece of music you listened to?
That I listened to that somebody else had done, or that I listened
No, just what is the last thing you listened to? Was it anything on the radio, on your?
Well, I played handpan last night, and that would be the last music that I listened to would be like on the handpan.
What's that?
It's this beautiful, this kind of looks like it, this thing back in the background. This is a tongue drum, but the handpan it's just like a big flying saucer, and it's only in tune to itself. So it's like, or not only in tune to itself, but it is all perfectly in tune to itself. So it's like a drum that you can play that you can't hit a wrong note, basically. And it makes like toned music.
So you play that? See, I would never have known that. See, that question's kind of cool. I asked that question to someone and they just threw him for a loop. He was like, oh my gosh, Barbra Streisand. And he was so embarrassed.
Why? Barbra Streisand's awesome.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I love her. Yeah. But it was, but yeah, I would never have known you played that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful too. If you want something to work to or something, type in like handpan meditation music or handpan music, and you can hear the tone. It's really such a beautiful instrument.
Is that why you do it for meditation?
I do it because it sounds really pretty, and I just like love. Yeah, it's like a meditation, I guess. It's very present making, but it's like just making sweet, beautiful music.
Does really Paige do it too?
Sometimes, not as much. She's been learning the ukulele. And she really enjoys that. And sometimes we'll play together. I also play guitar and ukulele. So
oh, neat.
yeah,
Oh,
we'll
fun.
we'll play together on that. But the handpan, she mostly listens. It's really
Okay.
pretty.
Neat. Well, I never would
Yeah,
have known unless I asked you that question.
totally.
Anyway, thanks, Ben. It was so
Yeah.
fun.
Thanks for the conversation.
Yes,
Keep
you're
doing what you're
welcome.
doing.
And
You're really on sweet purpose.
you're what, on sweet purpose?
Yeah, you're on a sweet purpose. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And all
Yeah.
my friends up there in Bonnie Lake, go find Ben. Go find Ben go hang out at all the coffee shops. I'm sure he'll meet you.
If there's people listening to this in Bonnie Lake, Paige started a community group called the Bonnie Lake Girl Tribe, and you can find it on Facebook. And it's got 1,700 members, and they're like very active. They like do events together all the time. So
Oh,
if you're in Bonnie Lake, check out the Bonnie Lake Girl Tribe. It's really beautiful.
oh, perfect. All my
Yeah.
Bonnie Lake tribe. Anyway, thanks, Ben. So fun to meet you. So fun to
Yeah,
I could
great.
talk to you all day.
Totally.